Welcome to this roundtable on StratNews Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Today we're going to be discussing the challenges faced and the opportunities in the optical fiber sector in the telecom industry. And our very, very special guest today, Mr. Tarun Sibal, co-founder of CloudPhotonix, a premier and a path-breaking organization which deals in this particular industry. And Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, who's an expert in technology and at the intersection of technology and strategic issues. And I'm sure that he'll be able to tell you much better about this himself. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. It's a delight to have you with us. Let me confess that I'm more of a generalist than a technology person. So there will be times when you'll hear me asking questions which for you would be very simple answers. But let me start with you, Mr. Sibal. Could you just tell us what your company does and why it is such an important factor in today's domain in India?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for the introduction. I'm delighted to be part of this. CloudPhotonix is basically focused on the overall photonics space as a whole. So when we define photonics, this is anything to do with light, right? Light energy. This has implications for civil, for defense, and the technologies go from transmission to display systems and so on and so forth, right? To keep it very simple. In India, unfortunately, a lot of this is being imported. So we spotted this gap about 2 to 3 years ago when I was working in a data center environment. And we started to see that there was not only a lack of basic understanding, but also both in terms of buyers, but also in terms of where the applications are for this, right? It's being brought in as a bomb without really sort of understanding what it entails, right? And where it goes. And that's what started our research into this process. And in 23, we founded CloudPhotonix. There are about 5 of us in this. All of us with deep global domain experience. 4 of us coming directly from the photonics space. I've been selling technology, so I'm more on the commercial side. But my co-founders, we've got deep domain experience in high-speed lasers, which is an integral part of this. We have chips, what we call the TOCANs, the actual chip that will drive this whole ecosystem in a truck, which is a small plug-in device that you normally see physically. Module integration, that's a separate area. And then networks, right? Application. And then finally, manufacturing, because that has a very different connotation to design. So we combine design and architecture and manufacturing. That's what we've endeavored to do in this space.
Okay, so in India, who would be your primary clients?
Primary clients would be telecom, your ISP, so your internet service providers, data center operators. They're a very big part of this. Your payment platforms, banking systems, right? So anywhere, metro systems, for example, right? Railway networks, railway signals, so RailTel, for example. So these are all areas where you need some form of transmission, right? Where you are communicating, you're either doing it through voice or data or a combination of both. And you need to drive this at high speeds on a fiber optic cable, right? As opposed to what used to be copper. So where copper runs out of juice, fiber optic steps in. Right? So where you need large volume of data to be thrown at a certain distance, right? And at a certain speed. That's where this technology comes in.
Oh, that's. I think you managed to sum it up in a very, very easy to understand format.
Thank you.
But, Dr. Bhattacharya, I think one of the things that perhaps Mr. Sibal forgot to mention is the application in the defense industry as well.
Right.
Do you have defense people as clients?
We don't have defense clients per se.
Okay.
I do believe that we want to walk before we run in that space, because while the principles of the technology will by and large remain the same, the operating conditions change drastically in that area. So
because of security reasons.
Conditions,
right.
ruggedized conditions. security, of course, is common to both. You need that in the civilian networks as much as you need it in the defense networks, and that's an understanding that I think we need to evolve in the ecosystem, because I think that point sometimes is missed. But more importantly, as I said, in defense, you're part of, so transmission and cybersecurity is one part of it. But then this extends itself when the moment you go into LiDAR, what you call light detection and ranging systems, night vision, infrared cameras, guidance systems, right? So wherever you are looking at intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance, IRS,
yes,
right? There the applications come in, and you have, we all know the major players. They're all big suppliers of this. But this particular tech we believe, as CloudPhotonix, what we believed is we needed an engine to pull the rest of the train. And in my mind, dealing with tech over 30, 35 years in various spheres, adoption and absorption of tech is where things normally fail. Right? You may have a great idea, you may have a fantastic alpha, and you bring it into market. But if the adoption and absorption of that, the ecosystem is not ready for it, no matter what you do, you're going to run into issues.
Of course.
So we got into we identified that people, process, and systems were very nascent in India in this space, whether academically or otherwise, especially because we are looking at hardware and pure physics, etc. So the talent is there, but the domain experience is lacking. So let me clarify that. India has plenty of talent. Talent is not the issue. It's the domain experience. So we needed people who have been there, done that, to get to market pretty quickly, and then build downstream efforts on processes, embed that, and then create the upstream pressure to get the componentization, etc., in to sort of evolve the space and move it into a different orbit, so to speak.
Dr. Bhattacharya, now that we have this context in place, could you just sort of explain the reason why, despite India having, been in this process of digitizing itself for 20 years now, easily?
Absolutely, yeah.
Or more, possibly. Why is it that it took Mr. Sibal till 2023 to actually decide that there's a gap here?
No, so let's be clear that technology has been developing in the last 20, 25 years. It's not that we had all of this technology in year 2000. That's roughly the time when India started its journey on e-governance and digitalization. So there has been a rapid pace of technology. In fact, one of the questions you were asking about defense, it's not about CloudPhotonix. It's about what we as a country need. CloudPhotonix is a stepping stone,
right.
A very critical stepping stone. If we don't have that, we will not be able to service the defense. Let me step back and give a little more context as to what are we really talking about. In the 1990s, there used to be a professor at MIT called Professor Negroponte, who had come out with this $100 laptop and so on and so forth. He came out with a very interesting principle that air will be replaced by wire and wire will be replaced by air. Now, what does that really mean? For those of your audience who are older, of my generation, which is still pretty young actually, they would have made long distance calls to US or even to Hyderabad from Delhi, and they would have called over a copper wire going over through a satellite. They would have made a call over satellite, and therefore there would be a significant amount of delay in the conversation also, because the signals will go to the satellite up, which will be at 36,000 kilometers up, would be the geostationary satellite. It'll beam down the information. By the time it comes, there will be a delay. Similarly, you would have a satellite connectivity between US and India, and that's really what led to the telecom, to the IT revolution, because folks sitting in Bangalore on a very thin 64 kbps connectivity started.
I remember those, yes.
Right?
Dial-up screaming at each other.
All of that is air. It's going through space. And what happened in the last mile? Last mile, there was copper wires coming to your home. You had this rotary dialing system. You would pick it up. And then as technology progressed, you had a modem which would connect to this copper wire, and it made this sound, and then it will magically connect. And you'll have a high-speed connectivity at 16 kbps, right? That's the kind of connectivity we would have. Over a period of time, since then till now, rapidly, the air part of it has been converted into fiber optic. So now you've got cables going all the way from US to Middle East to India to Singapore and so on and so forth, right? And therefore, when you look at war in today's day and time, you will see that there are ships which are just going and ripping apart this fiber optic because
Yes.
it's so critical, right? That's where the war part of it comes in. We have seen that happening in the Ukraine-Russia war. Chinese ships apparently
North
have
Sea, yes.
gone there and ripped apart the fiber optics, thereby degrading the ability of these economies to function. And as the economy gets degraded, the military also gets degraded. Now that's an indirect degradation. There's also a direct degradation. You have, for example, our indigenous aircraft carrier. It has got more fiber than the city of Delhi has. That's the amount of connectivity we need. Now, all of us have seen Operation Sindoor, right? We needed to respond within seconds, right? We didn't have the luxury to fire an anti-missile system after an hour or after 5 minutes. So we didn't have that kind of a luxury. So in order to be able to respond quickly, you would need fiber optic, which by definition carries light. Light is the fastest thing in this universe. You cannot go faster than light. And therefore, when you send a signal, it goes at the fastest speed possible. If you have a copper wire, electricity travels at 1/10 the speed of light, and therefore there is a delay. And therefore, when you had copper wires connecting Mumbai and Delhi, and you would make these trunk calls, there would be a delay because you're talking over a copper wire. As warfare shifts into network-centric warfare, as we have seen in Operation Sindoor, we need rapid response. Not only that, we need a very strong military-industrial complex. Now, fortunately, again, in this particular operation, we have seen that because of the steps the government has taken, there was significant industrialization from the military perspective that India had, and therefore we had weapons that the rest of the world had never seen or imagined. We could customize solutions from a war perspective, which are needed from our terrain, our war principles, and so on and so forth. If we don't have that capability to craft things as per our requirements, we will not be able to service the warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what gets even worse is the fact that all of this can be degraded. So anything and everything that can be weaponized will be weaponized. We have seen that happening with pagers.
True.
Right? A simple thing like pager can blow up. Now, let's not delude ourselves and say, oh, there was only one thing that happened. They had, and in this case, the Israelis, as we all know, they have at any point in time 30 to 40 such quote-unquote weapons out there.
Mm-hmm.
They use some, they don't use some. Some of them lapse and so be it, and technology changes. Why am I putting that up? It's because when we look at optical telecom, and I'm just focusing on optical because, again, the government has done a stupendous job on the rest of the telecom equipment. We have the mandatory telecom certification standard, MTCTE is out there. We've got the National Security Directive for telecommunications equipment. So we have these steps taken. But there are new technologies that have evolved, and there are some things which have fallen through the crack. And optical communication is one such thing which appears to have fallen through the crack, and which is where it's important that in today's context we really bring it up sharply so that we start solving it. Now, in optical, there are two parts to it. One is passive and one is active.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the point is, what is active and what is passive? Active is very simple. Anything that requires power is active. Anything that does not require power is passive.
It's like software and hardware.
It's like, well, not really.
Okay.
But let me give you an example. Like in a car, whatever is powered by the battery is active, but the door is passive unless you got sensors in it.
Got it.
Right? It's a dumb thing, right? Now, what turns out is that what appears to be dumb is not so dumb. So till now, the thought was that anything that is active, since it has got power, so it may be sending stuff to our adversaries outside of the country or would be compromising us. What has turned out, thanks to some of the deep research done by the US government, is that even the passive components, such as like a fiber optic, can be weaponized. And how can it be weaponized is because it has a natural process of degradation. For example, if it gets exposed to hydrogen, the amount of data it can carry starts degrading to an extent that it can become opaque. So imagine billions of dollars spent in BharatNet 3, which is supposed to stay for the next 30 years because the fiber optics life is about 30 years, gets finished off in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That is weaponization
Mm-hmm.
that has happened, right? Similarly, the active part of it, if the transceivers, which is what CloudPhotonix focuses on, in opticals, the key part is a fiber through which the light passes. And when you pulse the light, you push information through. Now, when the light has to get converted to electrical signal, because all our computers, our systems, they are electrical in nature. You have to take the light, convert it back to electrical. That's a transceiver. And then again, that computer has to send information out. It has to convert electricity into light and pump it out very quickly. Because as I said, electricity moves at a speed which is 1/10 the speed of light. It is a little too late and a little too fatal in that sense. Because if it's 1/10 the speed, then by the time the missiles would have finished us off. So we do need to respond. So the transceivers become very critical. The fiber optic becomes very critical. And therefore, we need to move to a paradigm where we start protecting every part of our fiber optic and our optical communication. You will be interested to know that the US government has passed a policy called the Trusted Fiber Policy. And that policy says that every part of the fiber needs to be built within US. There has to be traceability, because if something starts degrading, we don't even know where to find it from. It can't be an importer who imports from God knows where, puts a stamp on it, and says, now it's branded. It is not. Can you tell me where it came from? Can you tell me which batch of preform it came from? Well, the answer is not there. So if the US communication is suddenly degrading, they wouldn't know how to handle it. And that's where they figured out that the fiber can be weaponized. They figured out the transceivers can be weaponized. Now, the problem from our side is therefore, how do we make sure that all our transceivers are controlled by us, are manufactured by us? How does all of our fiber gets manufactured locally? We don't want to import from anywhere else. And those are the policies that we need to start focusing on as a next step and strengthening what we already have as a base for telecom policies.
Okay, so
if I can just add,
yes,
because I think Dr.
Please.
Bhattacharya raised he's teed it up beautifully. So while he's defined this part of the equation where, it can be weaponized in a certain way due to various considerations in the field, etc. We made the example of hydrogen. There is another strategic aspect to this. Global supply chains are constantly moving. They are in a state of flux. My favorite example for the industry we are in, I draw parallels with the auto industry, the way we were 25, 30 years ago, when Premier Padmani and Hindustan Motors, they dominated the Indian market. And I think at least a couple of us are probably of that vintage where when I learned my driving on a Premier Padmani. But after that, if you remember, we got dated technology. So Rover 2000 came and it used to give like 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers to a liter.
It was known as a
Right?
supercar
But
in
it
those
was so
days.
starved of a aerodynamic body that it still found some traction. Then Hindustan Motors came with an Isuzu engine and they put in a Contessa, what they call the Contessa. And then Fiat took a 127, which was the vintage in the taxis in Italy, and they gave us the 118NE.
Yes.
Right? And sort of the market evolved, and then of course Maruti happened. If you look at today, right, and within that, it's only when Maruti came in that the automotive component ecosystem really took off.
Right.
The steering systems, the power steering, radial tires, blah, 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 all of that came in with that sort of inflection point. We are in this space where after we signed that ITS in 2019, we basically exited hardware for a matter of 10, 15 years. So hardly any work was done in India from a product standpoint, a research standpoint, when it came to hardware, right? We did a lot of work in software, obviously. We are now at a juncture where globally, the workhorses are moving to 400, 800 kilometers, 400, 800 gigabyte per second speeds. Right? So if I look at the United States, I think if I may be corrected, but what I recall is 802 kilometers is the workhorse there, right? 800 GBS, 2 kilometer distance is the workhorse. India, we are still moving to 100G. If you look at the way BharatNet and others are constructed, it's still 10G, which is 10 gigabyte per second. In that variant, you can get up to 10 kilometers. We can go up to 40 kilometers. We can go up to 80 kilometers, but the throughput is limited. We also have dirty fiber. What we mean by dirty fiber is not that the fiber is dirty, but we don't have enough reach. So what we are using is bidirectional transceivers So imagine the old single lane highways where cars are coming and obviously you have a problem overtaking. Same thing with data. I am transmitting data along the same fiber and bringing back data along the same fiber, right? Which is a little more cost effective in terms of laying fiber cost, but it's not as efficient, right? Now, juxtapose this with the issue that global supply chains are shifting. They are moving to higher speeds, higher margins as AI, digitization, all of that. Seeding space for lower variants, right? Mid-range, up to 100 gigabyte, I would say, mid-range variants, which means that there will be a time when India will still need that capacity, but we may not have it globally, or if we do have it globally, it will come at a cost, at a higher cost than it should. Because componentization for that, the ecosystem, manufacturing ecosystem for that is starting to exit to different domains. So that is a massive challenge as well. When we look at and when I look at this terrain in terms of pure execution standpoint, in addition to the adoption and absorption of technology that I talked about earlier, we are using these speeds to train people, train an ecosystem, because the moment I go into 100G, that's 25 by 400. Now I've got intercoolers. Imagine you're running micron thickness lasers, like light signals, thinner than a hair. I got 4 of these. Now you have jitter, you have heat that this thing is emitting. So I need to cool each of these. That's the tech. I'm putting it in a very layman term, but that's the tech that you deal with. So that's 25 into 4, 100. And then you go into 100 into 4, 400, right? And then 200 into 4, that's 800, and so on. And US is now researching, like the CTO, our co-founder and CTO, before he came on board, he was already doing work on 3.2 terabyte. So they've gone 800 to 1.6, and now they're already tracking 3.2 terabyte per second. Now let me dumb this down in a different way, right? Look at the implication for this. I was at a Cisco Bangalore site, working in the healthcare side a few years ago, 2010-12. And I had the most amazing experience where Cisco had a doctor at the site on campus in Bangalore. This doctor was addressing patients in 22, 23 villages. These patients were being brought in by an Anganwadi worker. So for your common cough, cold, ENT kind of a thing, they would come in before a terminal, a camera, very high resolution images of the throat or ear or nose or whatever through local instrumentation kept at the Gram Sabha or wherever was being, and this was a pilot program, this was being telecast on a massive screen where these panel of doctors were sitting. But imagine the implications of this when it comes to put AI on top.
Right.
Now you're cross-referencing, let's say, AIMS, right? Today, an AIMS OPD is 600-800 patients sitting on any particular day outside.
Absolutely.
Imagine if you have all that data digitized, you are now able to cross-reference an algorithm. Now, the reason I'm giving you this is what a transceiver does, because behind this whole thing will be the speed, the distance, and the volume that you're going to put through. Now, you got that patient sitting there. Patient comes in and says, look, I am 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers. I can't, AIMS is in any case a tertiary hospital. So why should there be, primary? They're sometimes seeing very basic issues. So this patient comes in, is looked at. The algorithm generates diagnosis and says, look, this is not serious. You don't need to see a specialist. Here is your diagnosis. Here is the medicine. And maybe at some stage that medicine actually goes to a nearby pharmacy and that pharmacy is able to dispense medicine. Imagine what this does for cost of insurance, what it does for alleviating access to basic medical care. And the technology behind it is the transmission, which is the transceiver. And this is in healthcare alone. And you can now replicate this in let's say education systems, any kind of data that you want collected. It could be pregnancy data or healthcare data at remote areas or villages, etc. So there are enormous implications of this technology, not just in the sense of very, very, I would say, advanced thinking areas, but very basic socioeconomic impact is
how the optic fiber industry is in a nascent stage in India. And what I want to check with you, Dr. Bhattacharya, is that how much of this stuff do we actually make here and how much of it do we have to import because of the supply chains that you mentioned earlier?
The whole bunch. And when we say import, it's largely from our northern neighbor. It's largely from China. So most of the transceivers that you don't make comes from China. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
Right? And why is that an issue? We have seen recently what China did to the US, which is obviously a superpower, when it stopped the supply of rare earth magnets.
Critical minerals.
A small thing, rare earth magnet, small thing, $70 million hit for China, a $2 trillion hit for the US industry. Everything from defense to automobiles, everything got hit. That is leverage. Now, you look at what they did with India. They stopped the travel to the Mansarovar Yatra. Right? They said Indians can't travel. They thought that will put pressure on the government because Indians will be deeply affected and they'll be disaffected with the government in that sense. So we see how weaponization is happening, right? I'll stick to that note. If you look at when you open up your television and you want to watch in today's world, you hardly watch airwave based television. You watch on Netflix, you watch Z5, you watch all these other channels which are essentially streaming channels. How do they come to your TV? Now, in many of the urban homes, it's through a fiber that comes. Right? It's called fiber to home. Now, a lot of other people will say, well, I don't use fiber and I can use my phone and it's got 300 Mbps connectivity or an air fiber, which is wireless, and I'll plug it in. So I don't need fiber. Well, where does the fiber connect to eventually? Your wireless. It goes to a tower. The tower in the back end is again connected to the fiber, right? So that's why there's a huge push from the government to have fiberization of every single tower in this country so that this 300 Mbps of speed in 5G can be supported, right? So when you put the fiber, along with it comes the transceivers. And you need to continuously keep updating the transceivers because it is like a ball bearing in a machine. It can go bad, you have to fix it and you have to take it forward. So if tomorrow the Chinese decide that they need to put pressure on the Indians, just like they stop the Indians from going to Mansarovar Yatra, they will stop the supply of transceivers. Pretty soon, slowly, our networks will degrade. You will not be able to watch Netflix and your favorite shows and Z5 and so on and so forth. And that is what weaponization is, and that's what we are very, very worried about. We need to very rapidly accelerate the creation of the optical industry in this country. Obviously, the kind of stuff that CloudPhotonix and Tarun is talking about are extremely high-end. We also need the 10 Gbps, the 100 Gbps, and so on. Having said that, it's high time that India, with 16% of the global population and massive amount of data being consumed, bulk of our data travels on fiber optic, we need to have the 3.6 Tbps kind of connectivity that we were talking about, because that opens up possibilities for our population which a regular fiber cannot provide to us. We need enormous amount of data to be pumped in. For example, he was giving the example of a doctor and they talked about a teacher. Let's say we need a teacher who is streamed to each of the classrooms. Now, the problem is that it's in a flat screen. Now, tomorrow, if you want the teacher to look real in a 3D visualization, then you would need this kind of a connectivity. You would need the 3.6 Tbps kind of connectivity so that the students can then relate with this teacher who is almost physically
like a hologram.
Out there, right? Like a hologram, right? The holograms consume tremendous amount of data. And that's the only way for us to really provide education and healthcare to everybody. You can't manufacture doctors in a factory. You can't manufacture teachers in a factory. The only way to have a population scale outreach is through digital, which really means that I take an expert in media such as you, put you in front of all the media classrooms in this country, and at one go give them the best education, and they all feel that there is a teacher standing in front of it. Along with it comes in the layers of AI that Tarun mentioned, and all other layers of technology, which are current technology, which is not even futuristic. These technologies will get enabled only when we have high-speed fiber optic coming in. Let me take another example. AI, everybody has heard of, artificial intelligence, right? You'll be surprised to know that those algorithms were not created now. They were created in the 1950s. Perceptron by Carnegie Mellon University, or is it Cornell, that was created in 1956. Why didn't we have AI in 1956? Because we did not have the compute power. We did not have the data, right? So everything else started falling in place once we had the compute, we had the data, and so on and so forth. Similarly, many of the technologies that we have created as of now will get enabled when we have got high-speed fiber coming in, which is where control over these technologies becomes very, very critical for a country like India.
Mr. Sibal, you are a sort of a pioneering industry right now. But where are we as a nation? How long, I mean, for you to scale to a level where you can sort of, do what Dr. Bhattacharya was talking about? What are the challenges that you face? I mean, is it buying material? Is it producing material? What are the big time issues that you have?
So I think there are 3 or 4 salient areas. So three I mentioned: people, process, systems. Right. So people, as in we have the talent, but we need to groom that talent,
right?
And we need to put them through their paces. And we are doing that in a twin flow. One is the manufacturing talent, where how they assemble, how they put things together, training them on that particular equipment, etc. Training them on certain testing recipes, calibration, tuning, etc. Part of the process. The second area is the architecture and design piece, right? Where again, that there is a certain amount of discovery there. I won't call it training, but discovery, and you're working on a live body, right? We don't have time to say we'll shut her down and we'll go away and come back in 10 months.
That was going to be my next question.
We can't do that. So we are operating in a live space, right? And we need to. So people is one. Process, I've already defined, that's part of this whole ecosystem. Third is the systems. We import every bit of capital equipment from abroad. Let's understand this. So I think while we are focusing, and we have to do it step by step, we can't attack the whole piece in one go. So we started with productization as a theme. We're doing that. But we also need to realize is that the equipment that I need today to set up a lab in photonics or to set up the production line in this ecosystem is imported. India is not making that equipment, right? So that's another area that we need to start to look at, but that's not our central focus today. But what we are doing is relaying knowledge around the identification of equipment. People misunderstand that how important the right selection of that equipment is, right? It's not that you can just take in anything because it's not like I have to build I'm making this mug, I get a mold, I get some stamping machine, and millions of these suckers come out. That's not the way this industry works. It's a bit of a black art. There is a certain amount of domain knowledge that gets percolated down at an individual level, and they are then able to, by feel, by understanding some months of experience, know that, okay, this is falling in the right parameters, this is not. So it's not only the digital side, not only the parameters that they're seeing on a screen, but they're also using a little bit of their horse sense and what they've learned, right? So there is that process element, system equipment. Fourth is market access. Now, the market today, my competition in the market is our importers. There are people who are importing, as Dr. Bhattacharya pointed out, labeling and selling, right? They are not doing any of even the process piece. I would still say, okay, even if you are importing components, but you are building, so our testing recipes are unique. My testing recipe may be completely different to yours, and that's the secret sauce, right? My a burn-in process. I may do 100% of, you may do 80%. Dr. Bhattacharya may say, decide, no, we'll do 60%, 70%. So our processes will be, they are copyrighted, they are different, right? And that depends on the engineering team and the CTO and what they put in place. So that separates a lot because, I mean, I want to make a very interesting point here. You know, we talk about semiconductors, and we throw these terms very freely.
Yes.
Do you know that the actual wafer or the actual component cost in a semiconductor is minuscule? See, by the time I start producing millions of these, there's an initial capex cost, but the actual production cost is not very high. The real value is in the know-how, the knowledge that you're creating, right, behind that. So the IPs that you're creating, the design knowledge, the process knowledge, that's where and then how do you monetize that? How do I put a rupee or a dollar value to that, right? Now think about it. Our definitions, the way so the reason I'm spending some time on market access is, if you look at the world over, you look at how the US developed it, was the Minuteman program. They had a laser missile guidance problem. That's where the chip was born. And then TSMC, University of Texas, I mean, all that story came, and then, you know, things happened. And Akio Morita came in and gave the volume and the scale because he said, you know what, I want to make Walkmans and I want to put it in music systems, etc. And because these guys said, oh, we've done it for DARPA and we've done it for defense, but now what do we do? Because, you know, there are not enough volumes. It's not a sustainable economic proposition, right? Cut to China. Why did Huawei become Huawei, right? They're now making cars.
Absolutely, yes.
They went from mobile to cars. They were given free access to the network in China. So if you talk to people who have a ringside view of how that developed, they say, look, you make mistakes, but you make mistakes in our ecosystem and you evolve, right? They were able to do that. They have a separate system of government thinking, etc. But we don't have those. That's why I said we are operating on a live body. I need to search for the next rupee to fund the next piece of process research or equipment or whatever that we are driving. Right? I'm also held to account by a price point which is dictated by the importer. Because if I come to you and say, look, I've done a great job and I'm giving you a Make in India product, but it's at 110 rupees, you will say, no, hang on a minute, I'm getting this. Your procurement guys will say, Arey, hame to 90 rupees mein mil raha hai. Mr. Sibal, why will I come to you? Right? But I said, no, but I've done Make in India. Look at the amount of investment I've done. I'm giving you a full Make in India product. That support is missing. Market access doesn't mean that you give a free run. If you look at, again, I take a leaf out of how other countries who have successfully done that, is that they've given there is a roadmap, right? A milestone-based roadmap. You evolve that. You create localization milestones. You give a certain help in terms of the process, right? I'll give you a case in point. Take surface mounting. You take a PCB board, I need to do now surface mounting, the way the industry does it, for every little, so if I have like 40 or 50 pieces that I need to put on that, or subcomponents that I need to put on that board, they'll charge me per piece. So it comes to half a paise, 1 paise, 2 paisa. It could go from 8 paisa to 40 paisa. That's the kind of range, right? Now, if I go with my volume today, I'm a nascent player. I'm just starting out. I'm pioneering. I've got maybe, I'll come to you and say, look, Tarun, you'll say how much? I'll say, look, I'll do 500,000 pieces. You'll say, acha, 500,000 pieces, I can give you this price point. I don't have the benefit of any aggregation because there is nobody else doing it. So even though I may go to an Indian player, that Indian player may give me a reasonable costing based on the volumes that I promise. That volume will never match the Chinese or the Taiwanese volume because they are aggregating at a global level. That's the scale they have achieved. So I'm giving you ground reality that what I may get for 2 paisa or 5 paisa globally may cost me 20 paisa, 30 paisa here, but that will make the difference, huge difference in my final cost to my customer, right? That support is essential if you are developing critical tech, right? That's at a very, I'm talking just at a very simple level. There is the other side to this, is how do you get talent here? One of the things that we managed to do against all odds is to get cutting edge people who've had a ringside view of, they've led teams. It's not people who have worked, okay, I was part of a team. The guy who heads our laser piece developed the first high-speed submarine lasers for US defense. Okay? So they come with a certain pedigree. Now, the reason we attracted them is that we all have a very weird theme running, that all of us, either from some member of the family side, we have a defense relationship. So my mom's side, for example, is a lot of them were in the army, right? So we actually, and we are all in our late 50s. So we got together and said, look, what is it that we can do outside the economics? Because if I was to hire somebody of the caliber of our CTO, there's no way that we can afford him, because we would be competing with something that is just not available to us. So once we get over that, let's say he comes in. Now he has spent 30, 35 years abroad. He has roots there. He has children to support. He has a life to support. But if I'm not able to give him even a smaller compensation, but in a way that he can service his needs abroad, that at a very basic level, things start to fall apart. So even on that side, if you see what has happened in with our northern neighbor, the reason they've managed to attract this talent is they've said, okay, I cannot give you this, which is what you got in the US. I'm certainly not going to give you this because that is the prevailing price, but I'll give you somewhere here, right? Of course, they are government-based, so they can make those calls. But we'll also allow you to remit that for your needs abroad without constraint. So whether if you're paying in dollars or if you're paying in pounds or euros or whatever. So I'm saying that some very basic policy changes, because the minds are there, the geopolitics is changing. There are a lot of people who want to come back. I'm actually happily see that, right? So it's triggered for various reasons, and I think these chips are falling in our favor. Question is, how do you make that? So people, process, systems, and market access. I think those four areas are absolutely key. And these are not just headlines. There's a lot of layers, as I said. I've managed, with the time we have, I've given you a sort of a little bit of a context of what we face on a daily basis. I think
this is a very important context. But Dr. Bhattacharya, how much of the issues that he just talked about is due to our lack of an R&D culture?
So let me, amplify what you were saying and start from there and answer your question. Everything he said was also true for mobile phones, if you recollect. 10 years ago, how much were we producing? Nowhere. We were nowhere in the list. In the last 10 years, we have now become the second largest producer of mobile phones. How did that happen? We gave market access to our own manufacturers. Absolutely. So it is so strange. Indian manufacturers don't have access to the Indian market. How is that access denied? That access is denied by bringing in cheap imports, by playing out on the economies of scale. Just like he mentioned that if you don't have 10 million units being manufactured, your cost will be tremendously high. If you're manufacturing 1 million versus 10 million, so the consumers won't buy. So what did our government do? Very smartly, what they did is they said that under the WTO, what we had signed as an industrial trade agreement as ITA 1, that mobile phone is not the same as the mobile phone we use now, because that mobile phone had buttons in it. This is a smartphone. It was a fig leaf of an argument, but that allowed the government to go ahead and put duties on import of smartphones. So that cost got transferred to people, which is a small cost to pay, because what happened subsequently was that an explosion of manufacturing happened in India, and we eventually are all getting benefit out of it. We're getting cheaper iPhones, we're getting cheaper all kinds of other phones because they're getting manufactured here. And now we've got global scale. In between, India was dragged to the WTO courts because they said, hey, you're interpreting ITA the wrong way, the phones are the same. And we said, fine, then we'll lose it at the WTO courts and we'll take it to the appellate authority. Now, as all of us know, the powers to be in the global arena have already sabotaged the appellate authority in WTO, and we
Yes,
simply
of course.
use that. We simply use that. So we continue to put a BCD, a basic customs duty, on import of phones, although we don't need it anymore because our phones are cheaper. The same strategy is needed for everything else, such as transceivers, such as fiber optics, such as everything where we truly want a domestic industry to happen. We seem to be going through this dichotomy where we say, no, we are very good players, global players, we will follow the rules, no matter what, that those who set the rules are themselves not following the rules, right? Nobody is following the WTO rules. 80% of the global economy is not following the WTO rules because 30% is US, 20% is China, and then few other countries. The bulk of the economies are not following the WTO rules. But we said, no. We cannot increase BCD. We cannot put anti-dumping duties. We cannot put quality controls and so on and so forth. We are trying to be, as they used to say, whiter than the whites in that sense, right? Whereas we are not looking at what is really needed for us. For example, let me argue out the transceivers case and fill me in because you are the industry expert. The argument will be if I put a BCD, a basic customs duty, on the import of transceivers from China, then my cost of connectivity will go up. Now, that cost is a very minor cost when you look at the total cost of the infrastructure. More importantly, I will know that that infrastructure will work for next 20 or 30 years. But if I bring the components from China, it may be cheap now, but it'll be Chinese, which means it may not work in the next 5 years, right? And so you have to continuously keep changing it. So is it really cheap? We don't know, right? And by our experience, it is not. And secondly, we need to provide that headspace, that financial headspace, to the domestic companies so that they get protected from this economy of scale and the subsidies that are being given. Land is free in China. Power is highly, highly subsidized. We all know that. There is an export subsidy that is given there. And on top of it, what we are seeing, at least in the chemicals, is that the third grade chemicals is what is sent out here because we don't have quality controls. And is that what we want to have? So when we are talking about a photonic industry, it has to be looked at in a 360 degree. We need the right set of people to come here. It's a challenging proposition. The Koreans had to increase their salary to double the US salary in order to attract the Koreans settled in US to come back to Korea, right? For some magical reasons, we're having smart Indians coming back. Let's just try and support that. So one part of the issue seems to be getting solved. And then there was the technology part of it. We need to ensure that there's a technology roadmap. We need to ensure that there is a demand being given to them. When the government wants to roll out something, is there a bias towards domestic players? And yes, there is. But is it there in photonics? That needs to be worked up. So we need to strengthen the government policies. The pillars are already there. But I think the photonics part needs to be brought in, and we need to provide support both for the passive component, which is the fiber. In fact, India has the ability to take sand, turn that into preform, convert that into optical fiber, put the sheeting on it, and actually give you a fiber optic from sand to the fiber optic. If you don't support it, parts of it will get degraded. What we have seen is very targeted dumping by the Chinese on this value chain. Similarly, wherever we see that there is a disproportionate impact on the value chain, that part of it is getting targeted by the Chinese. So they don't target the entire value chain, just the very critical part of it, finish off the Indian capacities. It has already got weaponized. So if you don't need to put a bomb to destroy his production capacity can be destroyed by simply selling the same stuff at half the price. Absolutely. That's the bomb I'm using, right? What is the impact? When I'm having INS Vikrant or Virat on the sea with all the fighter aircrafts, the Tejas, and so on and so forth, every bit of it is using fiber optics, optical communication, transceivers. The Tejas will have it, the Mirages will have it, the aircraft carrier will have it, and all of it is dependent on China. And we don't know whether it's working, we don't know whether it'll work in future. We don't know if when it stops working, can it be replaced quickly? Can be replaced domestically? And when war happens, it's a war of attrition that happens. Right?
Obviously.
It carries on. You look at the Russia-Ukraine war, and it's just carrying on. So Russia did not have all the weapons on day one, but they have an ability to manufacture all of it because they have the technology, they have the supply chain, or they quickly establish the supply chain post facto. That is what we need. If part of our defense supply chain is eventually dependent on China, that's a very threatening situation that we are in.
You're talking just defense, but even in the civilian domain too, it becomes a big challenge.
Of course, the military and civilian go hand in hand. If our troops are in the border and our banking system stops because the fiber optic is stopped,
you have a problem.
that's the end of the war.
Mr. Sibal, it's interesting. You mentioned that, okay, I have people who are now willing to work in India, but who have worked abroad under very challenging, under very high-end situations. What happens when that person comes in and finds that he doesn't have the same things to play around with which he had there?
Absolutely.
How do you fix?
So, fabulous question, and let me answer that very specifically. When we put this thing together, and no matter what you do on a piece of paper as a business plan, we all know it never turns out the same way. And we quickly ran into this situation where we said, "Oh, hang on a minute. How are we going to really free float this? Because I need software. I need a software platform which will handle testing of different variants." To give you an idea, I construct a building. The building has floors, but we don't make the rooms. Each room is a variant. So what you do is there are two pieces of tech. First, you construct the whole building software, the platform, and then you start putting that, okay, I'm going to now do 10G, then I'll put a 25G room, then I'll put a 100G room, and these are all customized. I cannot bring this off the shelf. So that's the first problem we ran into very quickly. And we've actually, as a startup, we floated 100% subsidiary in the United States to co-opt moonlighting talent. People who we knew. We couldn't afford these guys full time. But these guys have been there, done that. So they know exactly, it's like you've already mapped the route, you've been there, you've seen the destination, you've been to base camp and then to Everest, and you know exactly what, there's always an issue, but you know the risks. So we were able to develop that in half the time. Okay? So that's one part of that problem in terms of solving for, you said, lack of, I would say this comes under process and systems.
Yes.
We solved through that. Okay. The other, what we did is we went into, obviously, our engineering colleges. We floated a graduate training program where we brought people in. We sent them overseas for training, right? Deep immersion, brought them back. This is all on our dime, right? And we all know that no matter what you get signed, NDAs or whatever, these are not worth the paper they are printed on. In actual fact, you're relying on integrity of that individual and his or her attitude or hunger to be part of a space or an ecosystem, which is giving them a fantastic learning experience, right? So this is a twin sort of track approach that we've taken. It's the best we can do under the circumstances. We've also, a lot of the guys are actually operating out of the Bay Area. So our days start at about 5, 6 a.m. and they end at about 1 or 2 a.m. And this is sacrifice on both sides. Our guys here who are, need to be, awake for those hours, and our guys there who are putting in the time and the effort to help them through those, equations or whatever they are. And I have to say, it's been about, 2.5 years in now. As I said, the talent with the capital T is fantastic. We've got some great attitude. We've been very lucky to find some fabulous people, and their hunger to learn is what is propelling this. Because we thought they'll be a little slower on the ball. We had calibrated that, admit it, but we've done it in half the time, and we continue to build on that. Right? We continue to add layers to that. So that's one part. I just want to build on 2 points that Dr. Bhattacharya raised, and I think that's very, very important. One is technical support. See, when you import something, you never create an ecosystem for support. And if you look at some of the support requirements, the conversations that we were driving with customers 18 months ago are very different to what they are today. So today a customer is coming up to us and saying, look, I'm worried about end of life, sunset. That's the other point I want to make. These things, variants don't last for years and years. We are already looking at silicon photonics as the next piece coming in, right? That may be a game changer, while there are multi-source agreements, etc. So the questions being asked are, can you help me plan my network application for the next 5 years? Should I select A variant versus B variant? These questions an importer can never answer. Second, could you support me through customization? I have a reach problem here, I have a distance problem here, or I have a power. I'm not getting the requisite speeds. Have I bought the wrong device? Do I need something else, right? Or can you customize that for me? These asks are starting to come in. What this basically means is technical support itself can only be embedded if the processes and all these things are aligned, right? Any customization can only come in if the core knowledge is available, right? Whether I customize it or I don't, but the application of it as well, right? And then the third area is the support over 5 years or 10 years. If you look at BharatNet, the support ask is over a 10-year period. Now, think about this. It is not just my supply. One of the things that we are building on our own dime is, again, what Dr. Bhattacharya alluded to a little while earlier, is traceability. I supply you with 100,000 units. You put them in a certain area, geographic area. You then say, I'm going to upgrade that area and I'm going to now shift some of that to another zone. We are able to help you because not that I have visibility on where you've deployed, but through serial and part numbers, if you were to tell me that, look, you had made this compatible for such switching system, that's the other tech. Now I want you to do it for Y. We have the wherewithal to help the customer to do that because we have that whole traceability mechanism. So even after 5-7 years, if somebody comes and says, I need a test report for manufacturing and then for the final testing, right? And then the component level report as well, because I'm experiencing a epidemic failure or it could be a single point failure. I want to do a root cause analysis. So all of this is captured through this whole traceability mechanism, which you can't put a value on. I have to do that as part of the service that I provide. It doesn't translate into a dollar number in price, is what I'm trying to say, right? It is something that is a construct that I have to do to be relevant as I move this forward. And this is not an overnight play. You start and then you sort of keep scaling it up as the volumes sort of spread into the field. So this has enormous implications, strategic implications. We talked about weaponization. This is all data, very, very high quality data that you are generating, right? Which companies were deploying or areas that they're also generating. And then there is the throughput through the transceiver, which is essentially a class 1 laser product, which has a chip in it, which means, and has an embedded software in it, right? And in the US, you mentioned about fiber that they said that you need to have a trusted fiber. They also have another thing that any embedded software has to be uploaded in the United States. They don't allow you to upload something and bring it in. Again, to safeguard that piece.
This is a conversation which will probably require another round subsequently, and I hope to bring the both of you in. But let me try and close this with a very simple question to both of you individually, and I'll start with Dr. Bhattacharya. That if you were to sort of, say as a policy, we need to do 1, 2, 3, could you just list them out in terms of what should the government do right now to help people like?
Sure. See, the policies are already there. So there is PLI, there is ability to report basic customs duty, there is ability to put a check, mandatory testing of components and telecom equipment, MTCT, all of that is there. We need to now bring that policy infrastructure onto photonics. That's basically what we're talking about. So that policy infrastructure is missing out in photonics, including fiber optic, including transceivers, and everything else before and after. Let me take the example of US again. They've got an act which is pretty much like Atmanirbhar America Act, which is called the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA. Under the BABA Act, they say that for many of the infrastructure, 100% of the value add has to be done domestically, and telecom is one of them. So they will not accept anything which is not 100% domestically manufactured. Now, does that lead to the cost of infrastructure going up? Absolutely yes. But that cost is cheaper when you look at the total cost of ownership based on security threats, based on jobs created, based on control of technology. And that's the mindset shift we need to have. Now, at the top levels of the government, we have that mindset shift that if we need to pay 10% more, so be it, because there is a larger game that we need to play. That needs to percolate to
But
everybody
who
else.
picks up that cost?
Well, at different sets of people, eventually the citizens. Now, let's say we look at BharatNet 3 as an example. The bulk of the cost is being paid by taxpayers' money. And it is taxpayer who's paying it, right? So it's essentially us only who's paying it. Who paid the cost for higher cost mobile phones when there was a custom duty put on mobile phone? You and I paid for it.
Sure.
Did we complain about it? We didn't, because we knew that it'll lead to jobs for both of us or our children, and we'll have a larger ecosystem to play. So there is a larger trade-off that needs to happen from a techno-economic perspective, which is why I created the term digital colonization way back in 2005 to explain this phenomena. There is an economic aspect, there is an IPR aspect, there is a trade law aspect, which is kind of boxing us in. And it's not letting us unleash the power of techno-economy or technology-driven economy in India. And therefore, we need to take this series of micro steps. For example, what we did with the phone, we need to replicate it with the components, we need to replicate it with the entire photonics, and do it at a war footing. We can't be dilly-dallying it anymore, because every time we dilly-dally, for us it seems like 3 months more, 6 months more. For a little startup like Mr. Sibal's, it is 2 quarters gone.
Absolutely.
2 quarters gone, half a year gone. They had planned
That
for
hits the
money.
bottom line in a big way.
They had planned for money for 1 year. Half of that is gone. When will they scale up? When will they reach the market? When will they start getting some return on the investment? So pretty much we have signed the death deal for them by delaying these policy steps in technology.
Mr. Sibal, if you were to ask the government, I'm sure you don't want to ask for a handout, but what you are asking for is a back end in place. What would be a couple of things where you feel you need urgent support from the government?
So I think most of it was touched on by Dr. Bhattacharya, but I would add one or two areas. One is incentivize, the policy making should incentivize design-related plays. And I think incentivize with a capital I. Just putting even a tariff barrier, I would say, is not enough, because you eventually want people, you probably want 20, 30 cloud photonics. You don't need 1 or 2 or 3 in this game, right? And to do that, you need, as I said, you need to create critical mass of the right talent, or rather the right domain experience to start with, which would then drive the talent. It would multiply. It would be a force multiplier for the rest of the for grooming more talent. To do that, you need to, as I said, incentivize. So the policy making should be so from a non-tariff barrier, or sort of if you want to create non-tariff situations, it should incentivize. So for example, access at a slightly generous price point. That okay, we allow, if you are meeting XYZ% of domestic criteria, we give you government support or government procurement support. Examples like that, right? Or another example would be that you create a pool, right? Because a lot of us are running into, let's say it's a very large order. I will not get working capital to because I'm not that old in the system. I still have to prove a certain scale before I will get access to that kind of capital. Help in those areas that, look, this is preferred tech, this is qualifies all, and believe you me, no handout, qualify the tech.
Absolutely.
Put it through its paces. Make sure that the experts are convinced, internal experts, that yes, this is technology which is backable. But then on that basis, treat it on merit and allow it to flower, allow it to move forward in the direction by providing those impetuses or acting as a catalyst to evolve that. Once this messaging starts to come through, you will, and this also applies for the, let's say, MNC. I mean, we're not scared of
yes.
that. We are not scared. I mean, why should Qualcomm only have 2,000 engineers in let's say Bengaluru doing semiconductor design, but with overseas IPs? Why are they not able to do that for Indian IPs? Why is that IP not registered in India? I mean, that's a fair question, right? And question then is that what does Qualcomm, I picked Qualcomm as an example at the top of my head, but there would be others who would need that, look, what can we do to ensure that you create the IP here? Not just the a TOT where everything is still housed overseas or in some other location. I think that's really where the where the rubber
I sure
lies.
hope that the people who actually take these decisions are going to be listening to us. But you brought up this thing about Qualcomm. I was told that we design chips in India, but we don't manufacture them.
That is correct.
Where is that thing coming from?
So they're two different industries. And as you were saying, there is a design-led incentive, the DLI that is there, which is like PLI. Why is it different? It's because the economics are different. As again Tarun mentioned, manufacturing means you need to have multi-billion-dollar setup.
And supply chains.
And supply chains. The entire gases ecosystem, the chemical ecosystem, the people ecosystem, the talent ecosystem. So to sustain that, you need to have enormous aggregation of demand, which is what Taiwan very successfully did. And about 10, 12 years back, China looked up and said, look, we need to have the same as what Taiwan has for two reasons. One, because then they can shift the semiconductor industry to China. And second, if they do that, then Taiwan is not important to the rest of the world. So for them to walk into Taiwan becomes much easier. So for two specific reasons, they went ahead and they picked up all the fabs that Fujitsu had, Renesas had. And they were up for sale and China just picked it up. Whereas India's perspective at that point in time was that why should we pick up second-hand fabs? And we did not pick them up. They were available to us. It was being, the sales was managed by an Indian gentleman called Anand Agarwal. He's no more. He passed away very young. He had reached out and we did not have that appetite. We wanted to have new $5 billion fabs being put in, wherein we did not have the expertise to run it. We still don't have the expertise to run fabs. And whereas these fabs are coming in with back orders already, 75% of it will be running, which is important because if you get the fabs and they don't run, then they're a piece of junk. So these are enormous monsters. They consume tremendous amount of power, tremendous amount of water, and they need to be fed on a continuous basis, which is why aggregation is important. The Chinese government stepped in and made sure that this monster of semiconductor fab is fed. I wouldn't be surprised that sometime in future we may need to go to China for fabricating instead of Taiwan, right? And therefore, it's good to look at that design is happening in India, but that's a different industry. Fabrication is a different industry, and it's a different ballgame. And our government, the current government, has put tremendous amount of focus to make sure that we have fabs coming up. This is the first time in the history that we have fabs in India. We've had smaller fabs and which got burned down. The semiconductor labs in Chandigarh got burned down under very mysterious circumstances. Right? But those are also not at scale. This is the first time in the history that we're having fabs built up at scale in Assam, in Gujarat, and other places that's coming up. So we are slowly catching up, but we have lost 10, 15 years in that process.
10, 15 years, and by which time everybody else will have progressed as well.
Well, specifically China. That's the critical part.
Absolutely.
I mean, are we okay to send our fabs to our chips to China for tape out and manufacturing? That's dangerous. We can't.
That's almost a rhetorical question, but yes, I understand.
I mean, imagine BrahMos missiles and Akash thieves, their chips are coming from China. That's a dangerous proposition.
This has been like I said earlier, this has been a absolutely eye-opening conversation for me. I'm sure it will be for all our viewers. I would like to bring both of you back again.
Thank you.
Perhaps to extend this conversation to the next level. Thank you so very much for being with us today. And like I said, it's been a wonderful learning experience for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
very
us.
much. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
That was Mr. Tarun Sibal, who does some incredibly important work as one of the co-founders of CloudPhotonix, and Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, whose work intersects and the technology and governance, a very, very critical level of intersection, talking to us about how that impacts the photovoltaic chain and other issues which are of critical importance to us. I do hope you enjoyed this roundtable, and I look forward to having you with us again. This is Ramananda Sengupta.